Hi, I'm Valerie Englehart, and in this video, I am testing out this new piece of plastic I got in the mail that I bought for myself because I wanted to do more of these drippy, granulating scenes that involve making a big mess, and I was hoping that this would make it easier to handle the paper and might keep my hands a little bit cleaner. So that board is, I think, 12 by 16, and the paper I'm using is a 9 by 12 Watercolor XL by Canson. So it is an inexpensive student grade paper that I decided, after having 4 failed experiments doing something completely different and being a little moody about it, I decided to take out that frustration on painting a meadow-inspired landscape. The colors that I'm using for the majority of the piece are by Rockwell Art. The one I am currently using is called Opal Yellow, which is a golden brown color. Some of their color names leave you guessing. So I've got my spritzer bottle, and what's important about that is it is adjustable. So I can get a fine mist or I could get a thick stream. And I am using an oil fan brush. This is one I haven't used in a long time, because my daughter took it from me and it became hidden in all of her papers, and while I was cleaning a few days ago, I found it. So I also wanted to use it. So part of doing that board is this is supposed to be like the tree line. And so when you do these textured pieces, we're going with the flow of water. Be mindful of where you want the flow to go. If I had held it at a different angle, those lines would have been more horizontal versus vertical, and wouldn't have looked right for a tree line. But looking at this now, this would have been great for like a snowy bank. Now, because these are trees and I wanted to break up that block of color, I am sprinkling in some, here's another fun one, it's called Onat Diamond Yellow, a green color. I love Rockwell Art's granulating paints. They are so beautiful, so much fun to use, but it's fun to guess based on color names what you're going to get. Another important thing about using this technique is I squeeze the paint out fresh from the tube. I use a porcelain plate because I want to be able to catch as much of that pigment as I can. Now I do want to add a little bit of texture to my background, so I'm adding just a teensy bit of salt in a couple spots that we're not getting a ton of texture. Another thing about this technique is that a lot of that texture in the background is still technically forming. I won't know what it looks like for quite a while. And so in the foreground, I'm going in with more of that Onat Diamond Yellow, and I've included the color Fall Story because it has some orange tones in it when it starts to split, and I wanted a little more warmth in the foreground. So these are long grasses, and I did apply the paint in a diagonal sense. Lift it, spray it, and hold it. And while I have sped this video up by 200%, because otherwise you're just watching me hold a board for a very long time, which is what I'm getting to. You will need to hold up your paper sometimes for a full minute and just be patient. Just let it drip. It is so hard to do, especially because if you don't start seeing things right away, you might think you need more water. You probably don't. You probably just need to wait. Gravity has to do the work, but you have to give it time. And that's something I continually find that I need to remind myself. So part of why I picked the oil fan brush is it doesn't hold a lot of water. It is also very thick and heavy because it's meant to hold oil paints, so it does a good job of picking up that thick blob of tube pigment. Now, one thing I also like about that oil fan brush is it's good at making texture because it does have those thick bristles that splay out, so I can use it to drag pigment to create that grassy texture. But now I'm just doing a lot of hold it on one angle, let it drip, hold it on another angle, let it drip. The way that I'm getting my paper to stick to my board is simply I wetted it front and back. That also keeps the paper wet longer. So I've pulled out one of my palette knives. I want to do some scraping. I want to lift using the scrape technique to create some highlighted grass. I tried it once there and it was too wet. If the paper is too wet, you won't get a good lift. So I just had to wait a little longer. And one of the bonuses for wetting your paper front and back is it does keep it wet longer. It keeps it workable longer, but if there are techniques you want to use where you need that paint to be drier, you need to be patient. You need to wait. And I'm not a very patient person. So I'm going back and I'm working on my background now. I just want to deepen some things. When I was squinting my eyes at my reference photo, this is all becoming very mid-tone, and it's fine to have a predominant tone, and in fact you should. If everything's equal mid, equal light, equal dark, it can get boring. If everything's mid-tone, it's boring. So I went in and added some darks. I let the paint in the front dry a little bit and then tried spritzing it again, just because as paint dries, it will react differently when re-wetted. That is also usually how you get cauliflower blooms, which some watercolor artists avoid like the plague and others embrace with open arms. I'm in the latter category. Now the paint has dried enough for me to do this lifting. Now because this is Canson XL paper, it can get damaged easily, but it works really well for this technique because I'm not doing a lot of brushing. I'm applying pigment and then getting the paper wet. But if I were to try to use this paper for doing like 20 glazes or something that I'm wiggling a brush over and over, the paper will start to pilling. But now look at the background where I applied all of that fresh, juicy paint, and because the paper was still wet, it has softened over time and it has created this lovely glow of trees. And now pink is the opposite of green. I grabbed just a synthetic round brush, and I'm sticking with synthetic because I don't want it to hold a lot of water. And I've grabbed just some pink I had in one of my spare palettes. This is Daniel Smith's Rose Madder Permanent. And in my reference photo, I see a few sweet pea flowers. Now, because this is an abstract landscape and it's at a distance, I am not concerned with making convincing sweet peas. I am concerned with getting little pops of pink that give the idea of flowers. And because this area is still wet, you can still see the shine of the paper. That pink is going to diffuse. So even though I did pick it up from a palette, I did make sure to get as thick of paint as I could. And now I'm just doing a little bit of lifting, trying to break up some of the lines. I do want this to feel like I am looking through tall grasses into a line of trees, like I would when I would go hiking when I was a teen. I'd often go exploring. We lived in a wooded area, and sometimes you could find these beautiful clearings that you wouldn't have guessed existed. Stumble across flowers and deer, an owl in a tree. It was just really cool. And so even though I'm not painting a specific memory, I am using a reference photo from, I think this one, it's either from Unsplash or Pexels, but you can be inspired by your own memories, your own ideas, and still use a reference photo that you find online as long as you are allowed to use that photo. Because for me, I wanted to capture a feeling. I also just wanted to have fun. I just wanted to make a mess, have fun with color. So I've picked up my rigger brush now, and I do want to paint in just a few lines to suggest that they aren't pink blobs floating in space, that they do have stems, and sweet peas have very thin, kind of viney stems. So I just loosely wiggled my brush and created the idea of stems. And then now that things have dried a little more, just went in with a little more of that pink so that there is variation in tone. And notice where I'm holding that brush, way at the back. That also helps to keep my hand from touching the wet paper. And then I'm just going through, and if I'm finding any globs of paint, I'm trying to lift them and move them, just because then it sort of looks like there's a burn on the paper. And then, finishing touch, I wanted to break some things up in the foreground with a little more salt. And here's the finished painting. So if you liked this video, press that like button so I know to make more like it. And if you want to see more, subscribe because I make videos every Thursday. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!